So what people have found during kind of COVID, and whether it's because they've lost loved ones or because they've just tasted what it's like to have more time at home, they've gone, yeah, maybe I don't want to work full time anymore. Maybe I don't want to work this job at all anymore. Maybe I'm going to do my own thing online. And so the number of, however many millions of developers, software developers there might be in the US, for instance, there is less than there were at the start of COVID that want to work and do these full-time jobs. And that's the same across the world. So that's another kind of big factor. There's just less people that want to work. People have woken up that life is short. Maybe they want to do something a little bit different. And, that has an effect too.
This is the Agency Profit Podcast, the podcast for agency owners that want to run a more profitable business that doesn't depend on them. Introducing your host, CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, Marcel Pettipaw.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm joined today by a very special guest who's going to be helping us break down how to think about hiring and talent in a global remote work world where everything has changed. We've all kind of been through that process. We've all seen what happened over the last year with COVID. He is currently the CEO of JobRack, helping agencies and SaaS companies connect with high quality talent over in Eastern Europe, and comes with 15 plus years of experience in recruiting and leading teams at Fortune 500 companies. So with all of that, Noel Andrews, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Hey, Marcel, no worries. Great to be here.
Well, I'm really excited for this interview because this is a topic that I spend a lot of time talking to people about, but it's not my bag, right? Like, I understand the numbers behind this, but when it comes to figuring out how much somebody should be getting paid, I feel like everything I used to know about this has gone out the window now and has changed. So really excited to dig into some of the nuance of this with you. But before we do that, I want to give you an opportunity to, in your own words, just talk a little bit more about what you do and who you serve.
Yeah, no worries. So I bought JobRack back in 2018. It existed for about 3 years at that point, and it'd been kind of built up originally around kind of helping people hire developers, like software engineers and developers from Eastern Europe, against where do you go to find really good people that you can afford in early stages of your agency or your business that are kind of ideally, a little bit more closely culturally aligned with the Western world. Straight communication, kind of get things done. Hard work ethic, and Eastern Europe is that kind of sweet spot. I jumped in. I'd had a whole background in kind of corporate IT, technology, leadership, loads of kind of large team building and hiring. And it was kind of a real kind of serendipity type moment that JobRack became available, like the fact that it was like niche down and could see a huge opportunity within the world of remote work. Probably no one foresaw the last kind of 18 months or so and what's gone on. It's just a great kind of spot. And so we've built it out from there. And I now help kind of business owners, all kinds of online business owners, but especially agencies, hire, high quality people, for, affordable cost. We don't tend to lead on the cost side of things, although it is significant, but it's about the quality, and a lot of the time right now in the Western world, you can't find quality people with the kind of work ethic that, as agency owners want, for anything like what we can afford. So it kind of hits the spot pretty well.
Yeah. And I mean, you're absolutely right. We're seeing this, we're in the middle of a couple of audits right now with clients, and we're hearing this narrative of like, we're hiring new people now that have less experience than our team, and we're paying them more. So we're having to lift everybody's salary, and our margins are just vanishing into thin air. And this is like a concept that I want to tee the episode up with, right? Is like, if you think about what your average billable rate has to be, you generally want to try and get 50 to 70% margin for what you earn per hour versus what you're costing, on average per hour for the labor that's doing the work. So if you can drop that cost per hour, that means one of two things. Either you improve your margins, or you no longer have to be pricing things as high to still maintain a great margin. So there's a lot of value in understanding how to properly compensate people and how to find arbitrage opportunities. And we're going to be digging into that. The first question I have for you, Noel, is what has changed since COVID kind of pushed remote work? I would say like we fast forwarded 10 years in the life cycle. I think we all knew that remote work was the future, but the pace at which we got to where we are today, where it's so much more commonplace, most large organizations are now going to have to maintain or adapt to some form of remote or hybrid working. How has that changed the talent market and the way that companies are recruiting and compensating people?
So the biggest change is simply competition, right? So I used to have employers, and still do have employers and agencies coming to me with like a bare minimum job post, and they're advertising it at maybe a couple of $1,000 a month, and they're like, yeah, but they should want the job. They get to work remotely. Like that's the most exciting thing going. I'm like, yeah, you're not special anymore, right? The whole world is working remotely, right? And so competition has just changed the playing field completely. And on top of that, the shortage of kind of tech talent out in kind of California and in many places in the US, Canada, UK, etc., means that the big companies are now scouting around the world as well. And they're looking and saying, hey, well, maybe we can hire further afield. And actually, maybe that people don't need to be in the office, drawing on the glass walls and things like that. They've been forced to find ways to work not, together. And then they've gone and kind of been able to go a little bit further. And so then, they're now digging into these talent pools that previously were reserved for, more niche businesses in a sense that had started remotely. So competition is the biggest thing. That then obviously leads on into, you've got to, be a bit more special. You've got to do certain things to make yourself stand out. But that, just the kind of the sheer amount of competition. And I think another factor that a lot of people don't recognize or haven't recognized is that one of the reasons that there's more competition is because a lot of less people want to work right now. So what people have found during kind of COVID, and whether it's because they've lost loved ones or because they've just tasted what it's like to have more time at home, they've gone, yeah, maybe I don't want to work full time anymore. Maybe I don't want to work this job at all anymore. Maybe I'm going to do my own thing online. And so the number of, however many millions of developers, software developers there might be in the US, for instance, there is less than there were at the start of COVID that want to work and do these full-time jobs. And that's the same across the world. So that's another kind of big factor. There's just less people that want to work. People have woken up that life is short. Maybe they want to do something a little bit different. And, that has an effect too.
So I'm really curious, what are you seeing, and I'm sure that there's a mixed bag here, but what are you seeing large companies doing when it comes to adjusting compensation based on where people are in the world? Because I can imagine that a company like Netflix or Google or insert, large tech company, it's got to be tricky, right? Figuring out like, okay, if they're now going to hire a designer in Bulgaria, how much do they pay that designer when we know that a designer in San Francisco is probably making 200 grand plus per year? So what are the approaches that you're seeing these larger companies take around cost of living and time zone, and how that's influencing the arbitrage opportunities that used to be very clear cut in the global talent market?
I think it's a really mixed bag at the moment, and it's very immature, right? Hybrid working is still, for most of these large companies, is very, very new, and they're still finding their feet. And that's going to be the case, I think, for a few years to come yet. You've got the big high-profile cases. I think Facebook was one of them, for instance, that said, hey, you can move, but we're going to then take 20% of your pay, for instance. And I think that circumstance has moved on a little bit too. So everyone's kind of trying to find their feet, because the difficulty is if, someone moves from, I don't know, San Francisco to Nebraska, right? And they say, yeah, okay, I'll take a 20% pay cut. Well, what happens if they then move back to San Francisco? Do they get the 20% increase again? It becomes very, very difficult to manage. Here in the UK, in London, for instance, we've had for years, for decades, we've had what's referred to as London waiting, which is a premium you get for being in the capital because it's more expensive to live. And, I'm facing it within my own team. We're having this conversation. One of the team has just moved to Germany, and, as part of that, her costs have gone up. And so there's a conversation about her salary. But the work she's doing is still exactly the same, and the value she's providing is still exactly the same. The costs are different. So I think the big companies are still finding their feet, where it's much more complex, where you're taking an existing workforce that has previously worked in, let's say, San Francisco, and then people are saying, hey, I don't want to come into the office at all anymore. I want to go and live and work in Wisconsin, for instance, or wherever it might be. That's particularly complex. When they're then looking to hire in new places, then far more common is what I see is that they're looking at local cost of living and basing it, around that. And that's very, very common. Now, arguably, and I think what we'll see over the next few years is that becomes difficult, because you will get, let's say, a graphic designer in Romania, a graphic designer in London, and a graphic designer in, let's say San Francisco, all working for the same company. None of them ever going into the office, all being paid very different rates. It gets difficult to justify. So I think it's a minefield. I think it's very, very tricky, and it's, going to have to see how it plays out. I think most people are reasonably, what's the right word? kind of almost reasonably balanced about it from the employee aspect, right? They kind of recognize that companies have to do what they can do. And, if they hire locally for an office, they're going to pay more than if, you can sit on the beach in Thailand, for instance. But it's going to change. I think it's really going to shift.
Hey, it's Marcel here, and I want to take a moment to thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. If you're enjoying today's episode, then I want to encourage you to subscribe so you never miss another episode, and be sure to check out some of the other amazing free resources we have at parakeeto.com to help you improve your agency's profitability. We have lots of other content just like this episode, including other detailed blog posts on some of the key topics, and free downloadable resources like the Agency Profitability Toolkit, which has helped hundreds of agencies improve their profitability with checklists, templates, and free training videos to help you install the Agency Profitability Flywheel all on your own. So if you're interested in grabbing that, head over to parakeeto.com and check the show notes as well. So with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I'll let you get back to the episode. I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Yeah, I think it's a good observation. And the other thing to consider here is it's easy to feel like the state of the world right now is going to be the state of the world forever. But I remember 7 years ago, like houses were sitting on the market for 3 years. It was a total buyer's market. And now, house values are doubling every year. Same thing with salaries. Like people are getting offers for double what they make today to go transition to another company, but that's not going to last forever. The demand for this job sector of, digital skills, developers, designers, project managers, all that kind of stuff. People are there's going to be a 10-year period where a whole bunch of people are going to be graduating from high school, getting trained, getting experience, and then the landscape's going to change. So these things are cyclical. And I think to your point, Noel, like the current state is not going to be the current state for 3 decades. The pressure is going to start to release over time. And I would agree. I would hope that there is going to be a higher floor to those arbitrage opportunities, but it would be surprising to me if they really went away quickly enough that it's not still a viable strategy to be building your business on for the foreseeable future. So transitioning now to let's talk about how to put together a great compensation plan for a role and how to think through that. Because of course, there's the whole question of how do we figure out what to pay somebody and, what tools we can be using, what data we can be looking at to inform that. But then there's also the other levers that we might not be always considering that we can pull to make our jobs more attractive and make ourselves more competitive if we're not able to just throw as much money as possible at solving the hiring problem. So how do you think about building really great comp plans?
So the most important thing to do is talk to the person you're hiring about them and talk to your team about it. So whenever we are hiring for a role internally or helping a client hire, right from the very, very start, we're asking people their salary expectation. We're asking kind of what's important to them within the role, as kind of what do they want? Where do they want to go? And I think you build that up, and it's very rare that we get, crazy answers. It's very rare people are asking for 2x their salary. They're generally pretty honest about it. And when it comes to making an offer, we'll often have a conversation with them and say, look, when you told us the salary you were expecting, were you, kind of highballing it, lowballing it? Was it about right? And just have a conversation. That can surprise some people because some are sensitive talking about money, but it's much better just to have it kind of straight on the table. And before we make an offer and before we ever kind of, make offers for our clients or help them do it, we're always kind of saying, look, let's have a conversation. Let's understand what's important. Do they want their birthday off every year? Is it important that they have a half day on a Friday because they've got a particular hobby? Is it that they want to be kind of have some training courses and some development? Is it that they want to have time to kind of senior people in the business to be able to learn from? And, with agencies, there's tons and tons of different skills they can learn. And so that's the first and most important thing is talk to them and understand what's important to them. A lot of the time, probably 80% of the time, it's non-financial, the things that really make the difference. So for people in Eastern Europe, generally they are looking for long-term stability, right? Which is great because as agency owners, that's what we want, right? We want people that are going to stick to us, not just going to disappear, fly by night because they've got the latest gig offering them another couple of dollars an hour. So talk to them first of all. The second thing, again, it's non-financial. It is about putting across what it's like to work in your company, right? Whether you have great parties and great annual retreats or whether you never meet face-to-face and you have no meetings and you have a no meeting culture, whatever kind of life is like, put that across, when you're hiring, in a job post, in a little video, whatever it takes, to put across what it's like to work in your company because you want people that are attracted to that. And, it's really important not to lose sight of just how attractive working for kind of online businesses that are remote first, perhaps, or that have just, are kind of committed to these ways of working. That is really, really, really appealing. Third thing is definitely, focus on making everyone feel like part of the team. So whilst legally they might not be an employee, you might have to use service agreements where they're in another country. Actually, for all intents and purposes, they are an employee, right? They are a team member, part of the team. You should treat them the same as you should treat everyone else. So they're the kind of three kind of most important things for me. There's kind of specific levers you can do. Things like I've got one very, very forward-thinking, relatively small US agency. They've got about 25 people. And they're doing training stipends, right? They're doing home working payments. So it's like $750 a year towards your home working setup. They do a pretty generous training plan and kind of money towards training. And so whilst their salaries aren't actually that high, everything that goes around it that makes it attractive for people to commit to them and come and work for them is really, really significant. And so whilst sometimes we have to explain that to the candidates and kind of what does it mean and why should they care, generally the commitment to developing them and their career and their skills, both internally for progression, but also for a future job elsewhere possibly. That's what we see as really, really important.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? To just understand what is it's like a sales conversation, right? What is valuable to the candidate in question, and what are the non-financial levers we can pull to make this job actually support? Because ultimately, like, that's what work for most people. And this can be hard to understand, I think, for entrepreneurs. We forget what it's like to just think about our job as a thing that supports our lifestyle, because it's very easy for us to just see like life and business. It's all just one big thing for us. Hard to create separation there. But for most people, that's not how they think about it. They're thinking about their job as a vehicle to enable all of the other things in their life that are important to them. So if we can shape the job to support that lifestyle, it inherently creates a lot more value. I think that's a super interesting takeaway. I want to double click on this just a little bit and talk about the resources or tools or data that you use to figure out what the range should look like for a person based on where they live. Like, of course, there's lots of the Glassdoor and salary finders and cost of living index websites. There's lots of things to be looking at, but what do you find to be most reliable? What tips would you have for folks as they're going through that process?
So the thing that we find most reliable, and obviously we're in a position of privilege in that, we are getting, hundreds and thousands of candidates applying for roles, and we get to see what they're asking for. And then we also get to see, and we know what our clients are actually hiring and what they're actually paying. So we have that, those conversations we're very open about. We kind of keep that, we've tried a few times to actually put it into a consumable format, like a salary survey or salary publication, kind of a guide. It's really, really difficult because there's so many factors that change it. I could have 5 senior developer roles all looking for React skills, for instance, and yet they're all completely different, and therefore it's hard to kind of have comparisons. So the main thing we do is, and what we do a lot of the time for clients is people will come to us and say, hey, I'm looking at hiring this role with these skills. Roughly what should I be paying? We'll get an understanding of what they want, and then we'll kind of, use almost our intelligence and what we've seen to be able to guide them. So it's not as concrete as it's not quite as simple, especially in Eastern Europe, where, the difference within one country could be 30 or 40% based on whether they're living in a primary capital city, a secondary city, or a tertiary city. It can really, make a huge difference. The nature and the popularity of the skills can make a big difference. So I think the best thing is, get input from people hiring in the area you're looking at and for those skills. So whether that's other agency owners, whether that's online communities and business communities, whether it's hiring sites, whether it's asking people like me, and I'm always happy to jump on a call or do quick kind of salary checks. And we'll just go and do a quick bit of research. We have access to hundreds of thousands of job seekers and candidates, so we can get that intelligence, but we like to do it accurately, kind of thing. So it's that 3 to 5 bullets on what does someone want, where's the right place to hire, and then go from there. Outside of that, resources like Glassdoor, etc., are great, but they're not perfect. So for me, there's nothing as good as just talking to people that have hired recently. And, let's say you're looking for a particular role, if you were looking in the US, then go and find adverts for those roles, and then just, get in touch with the company and say, hey, look, I'm another agency owner. I'm not competing with you, not looking to poach your staff, just curious, what did you end up hiring for? And most people are pretty open about those conversations because it's, if we help each other out, then, makes the world go round.
Awesome. It's a good insight. Cause to your point, you never really know. It's a mixed bag on these job salary sites, these job salary indexes. So I think that's good advice. Just go to the source and ask the question. On this topic, lively debate around this. What's your take on putting salary expectations or ranges in the job post versus not? How do you think through that question?
So I am very strongly in favor of it. There's a couple of other kind of job sites that I'm kind of, and owners that I'm good friends with. A couple have enforced it. We haven't done that yet, but we're probably pretty close to it. You know, we can see the data shows us clearly if someone puts negotiable on the salary range, people in Eastern Europe assume it means that they're lowball and it's cheap and it's really low salary, which often isn't the case. So what we tend to do is we're big fans. We say put a range and put a wide range if needs be. You know, we did a role recently that there was a range from $1,500 to $4,500 because they were prepared to take either someone more junior with a really great attitude or someone really, really senior. They were open to that flex. So what we'll often do is we will put the range and we'll put a comment in the job post to say something like, hey, you know, do you think you're worth more than this? Apply and let us know why. Or do you think you'd like a little bit less than this because you're looking to grow and kind of learn? Just let us know why. So we kind of give ourselves that little caveat. We just don't want to put people off from applying. But yeah, generally what we see is that if there's no salary listed, it puts people off and they just assume the worst.
Yeah, it's like the classified ads with no pictures and a contact me for price. It's like, yeah, no one's clicking on that.
Yep. Yeah, exactly that.
Awesome. So last question around this, any words of advice for those folks that maybe just haven't quite dipped their toes in looking offshore for talent on what they need to be thinking about to be successful in that endeavor?
Yeah, so the most important one is time zone. So just think about, you know, things that are important to you. So if you are a US West Coast based agency, right, and you do your daily stand-ups at 4 p.m., right, then running that with Eastern European team members is going to be difficult because it's going to be 2 a.m. for them. However, most, you know, I've got a number of West Coast agencies and businesses we work with. Most do stand-ups in the morning, and you can still get kind of 3-4 hours of crossover without a real problem. So the key thing to think about, especially if you are moving to hybrid working, right? If you're fully remote, it's actually pretty straightforward. It doesn't really matter, and you can get some great kind of arbitrage benefits of people working when you're asleep and you wake up to, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that's done. If you're hybrid and you've got some people in the office and some people remote, you have to take extra effort and make extra effort to make sure that everyone communicates. So, you know, as businesses are coming back into the office post-COVID, but only some people are back in the office, if someone walks across to someone else's desk to have a conversation, it's almost like they need to turn them away and say, hey, dude, we need to do this on Slack so that the others that aren't here can hear what we're saying, which is crazy. But at the same time, it's a genuine challenge. So main things is, you know, talk to people that have done it. I'm always happy to jump on calls with people and I'm very, very impartial about it. You know, obviously I've got a vested interest in helping people hire, but my ultimate interest is in helping people. If it's not right, I'll always tell them. There's a lot of success stories out there about the incredible benefits people have had from hiring in Eastern Europe and in kind of places further afield and, you know, dipping their toe in that remote world. And yeah, I'm always happy to help kind of chat through that. But for pretty much any agency owner right now, if you either would like more profit or easier sales, then hiring, you know, equivalent quality or better quality people for lower rates cannot help but be attractive to you.
It's a good call out. And I just want to second, you know, this idea of like, I feel that remote work is a forcing function for communication to be a lot more deliberate. And it's not to say that communication is lazy when you're working in an office, but you can get away with a lot of things that you can't really get away with in a remote world. So I think that's a really good call out that like, you're going to want to be a lot more intentional about communication if you do go down this path. So Noel, this has been a great interview. I'm glad we dug into a lot of the nuance around this. I've learned a lot. For those that want to follow you and the content that you're producing, where should they follow you online?
Yeah, just the best bet is head on over to jobrack.eu. Everything we post goes there, and there's lots of clear links there. If you want to kind of book a call, just have a chat as we head to the end of end of the year. Depending on when this pops out, then always happy to help people figure out what their hiring plans are and where they should look to. But yeah, jobrack.eu.
Awesome. So for everyone listening, in the show notes, we'll have a link to JobRack as well as Noel's social profile, so you can check him out. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this. Let us know wherever you're listening to this what questions or comments you have. We always love hearing from you. And Noel, thank you very much for being on the show today. This was great.
Hey, no worries, Marcel. Great to be here.
Well, that's all for today's episode, but it doesn't have to be the end of your learning journey. Make sure you subscribe to our show so you never miss another episode. And if you want to get access to more great resources, be sure to check out parakeeto.com, where we've got tons of other free resources, including the Agency Profitability Toolkit, which is loaded with templates, checklists, and training videos to help you improve your agency's profitability fast. And of course, if you like the show, it would really help us out if you could leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might get value, so you can help us serve more people. So with that, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.